Okay, so we should be live now. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the quarantine sessions. As you know, these sessions are meant to be an opportunity to turn this challenge into an opportunity to learn, to connect, to exchange experience, to exchange knowledge. And I am super excited because today we have a guest that is joining from Silicon Valley, a guest who has extensive experience not only in the startup field, but in the investment scene right now. So Brian Bordley, how
Valentina? Hey, you there?
Hello?
Hey, I'm here.
I am back. I am back. I am so
Don't
sorry.
worry about it.
Hello?
Hey, I'm here.
Yeah. Yes, so sorry. We keep getting cut off. It's my internet, it's my network. For everyone out there in Italy, the network is just very bad right now. Um,
Well, if it works for you, if it happens, I can just kind of continue along as well.
yeah,
I know you asked some questions, so
exactly.
um, yeah. Would you like me to introduce myself, explain a little bit about my background in the fund? Okay, I also want to pull open your questions that you brought up. Perfect.
Amazing.
Um, so hi everybody, I'm Brian. I'm a principal with the Berkeley Skydecek Fund. I think I got a little over here. We're a very active early stage investor, investing $100,000 into companies at the pre-seed stage. And then along with the funding, the fund I work at, we are partnered with Berkeley Skydecek Accelerator, which is run by UC Berkeley, a very well-known university and leader in technology and entrepreneurship. And they run a program that, along with our funding, um, helps early stage startups come to Silicon Valley for 6 months, co-locate or relocate here, access customers, access advice, access talent, and then finally access the large amounts of venture capital that really only exist in this location. And so, yeah, we've now had a fund for about 2.5 years. We've made 110 investments, so a very active fund, and have backed companies from all around the world. Everywhere from Ireland to Argentina to Colombia, Korea, Armenia, and Turkey. And so we're always looking for how to find great new talent out there.
Amazing. But Brian, I wanted to take a step back a little bit before talking about sort of the investments and the things that you're doing with Skydecek, because you have an amazing and a really interesting story, right? I mean, at 22, you became the CEO of an early stage startup. You raised 400K, was it?
Yeah, I think that was how much.
Right, $400,000. So tell us about it.
Yeah, well, I think this was back in 2014 when I just graduated from college. I was lucky enough to have worked at several startups in college, both that had successful exits. So I got to learn from some very good founders and kind of see what that early stage development is like. Was very lucky enough to partner with an amazing CTO and another co-founder. And we decided that we really wanted to figure out what it meant to be a consumer 3D printing company. And during this process, we decided that what we wanted to do was allow video game players to really get a real life object of anything they saw inside a video game. So if they're making a cool hero or if they're making a great Minecraft creation, how do we give them that real life version? Maybe I'll just pull one over here. Let's see if I got a good one. Here's one of my models we made. So we kind of would take models from video games and then bring them out in real life. So I started that right out of college, raised some venture capital, brought the product to market, and figured out after about 2.5 years that while what we were doing was going to be a great business, it wasn't going to be a venture scalable business. And I think this was a really good lesson that my first dabble in entrepreneurship taught me was, when VCs, especially in Silicon Valley, but I know in Europe as well, when they're looking to invest in a company, VCs are wrong so often that when they are right, they have to be right in a very big way. And the business I was looking at could have been a $20 million business, a $30 million business, maybe even a $50 million business had it been successful, but it was never going to achieve the sort of economics and scale that a billion-dollar or multi-billion-dollar company could do, mostly because 3D printing wasn't really ready for that type of level of production. Said sorry to my investors, many of whom I'm still friends with. Then went to work at a fintech company in Oakland that is a unicorn, and I kind of got to help them grow some revenue operations and was kind of an analyst there. And then went to a small artificial intelligence company as well that was backed by Google, helping them kind of grow and succeed after they just closed their seed funding. So spent about 7 years in startup operations before becoming an investor.
Right. And how was that move? I mean, you're no longer.
Well, I might just answer in case no one else can hear. Yeah, it was. Oh, there you go. Sorry, you broke off for a second, so I thought I'd just answer. It was a move that made a lot of sense for me. I think as a founder, I found it very. I went through 3 startup accelerators myself. I really liked helping early stage entrepreneurs. And one of my favorite things about being a CEO was helping the other CEOs out. And so I knew it was something after I finished my startup that I wanted to kind of move into eventually. And it takes time. It's a hard field to recruit in. But luckily I went through the Skydecek accelerator myself. And so when the fund got launched, it was very easy to make that transition.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was an easy transition as an early stage investor. Like Skydecek, we're incredibly, we work really closely with our founders. And by doing that, I still get, to help our founders go to market, find new customers, hire their people. So I still get to feel like a little mini operator for the 25 or so startups we help out every 6 months.
Right. Now, for the entrepreneurs that are watching and that have startups already, early stage startups mainly, that go through the Skydecek accelerator. Did I get cut off?
Yeah, just for a second.
So
yeah,
about,
maybe you can ask again.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about the kind of startups that Skydecek is looking for, right? Is looking to accelerate?
Yeah, definitely. For us, what we really lean on is, great founders building cool technology in these sort of massive markets. And we really consider ourselves the helpful people who can help these companies find their customers, figure out their go-to-market strategy and their pricing and their business model. We kind of consider ourselves the kind of business expertise. So we lean very heavily on technical founders. I don't think we have a set mold. In our new cohort, we have a education company from Russia. We had a customer service platform from Chile. We have a biotech company from Berkeley. I don't think there's a mold. What we're looking for is companies that can tackle kind of global problems that maybe aren't just trying to tackle a problem that's relevant for their home market, but somebody that can come to Silicon Valley and find customers here, develop a business here. But we're always kind of learning, and if we see something exciting, then we want to still invest in that and consider that.
Amazing. Are you looking for prototype phase, revenue? What kind of stage should they be at?
It really depends on how technical the product is. We have people everywhere from, we have a prototype with a couple letters of intents or pilots with customers. You see some sort of customer traction, but it doesn't need to be revenue. All the way up to companies that have $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 a month in revenue, who've already raised $500,000 or $1 million. And so people don't look to come through Skydecek for the money. The money is nice, but people really look to go through our program because what they're trying to do is really optimize to raise $1 million to $5 million by the end of our program. And they think that Skydecek, given our expertise, our network, is able to help these companies hit their milestones, revenue, team, technical milestones, so that they can go off and raise that money. So we're a little flexible on how early stage, but we definitely like to see some technology. I think most of our companies are at least 6 months old. They have some technology built. They have technical co-founders. And some business ones, but they have some technical talent, and they, have some semblance of customer validation. If that's revenue, if that's pilots, if that's LOIs or free users, we know that people kind of like what they're building.
Right. Now, I want to take us back to the situation we're in with COVID. I mean, things changed dramatically, very, very quickly. And how do you see that reshaping or changing the startup landscape, especially with the startups that you're in touch with through Skydecek?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot going on there. We at Skydecek just made about 24 new investments in the last 2 weeks. So for us, we are moving forward with how we're working on it. I wrote a small article, I think I published, you helped publish as well, that I think kind of outlined this. What I'm kind of hearing from founders, I think founders are definitely a little worried. A lot of angels have stopped making investments because they have bigger things to worry about. Most angels are doing this part-time. Many VC funds have become a little more worrisome as well. I think it will be hard to meet an investor and then close funding, at least within the next 6 weeks to 2 months. But we definitely have 5 or so of our alumni companies who have already met their investors, and they're closing. They just closed a round, or they're closing rounds in the next week or two. So we're still seeing some investment activity. I think at Skydecek we are cautiously optimistic about what's going to happen. I think we've been looking at China and see that China has been slowly kind of reopening its economy, and it seems like Europe and the United States are just, and maybe the Middle East as well, are kind of just several steps behind, several months behind. So, I think we're looking towards June and July as being a larger turning point for us. I think it's hard for our teams to go meet people in person and have those coffees, but a lot of our teams are still really making the effort to meet with new potential customers, with advisors. I think a lot of people have a lot more free time than they normally do. And so it's actually very easy to engage someone in a casual conversation because, even if they have the same amount of work they're doing, no one's commuting anymore. And so there's no kind of commute between meetings and commuting to work. So people just have more time to, I think, have fun, not fun, but have conversations and learn, but closing business will be hard because of, people are just kind of uncertain right now. For the VCs, I haven't talked to too many European VCs in this. I've been talking to a lot of VCs in Silicon Valley. I think luckily VCs are pretty far removed from public equities, and so they already have capital committed to invest, and they kind of need to invest some of this capital if they've already called it. So I think VCs are still trying to find good companies to invest in, encouraging their teams to lower their burn rate, because it might be Q3, Q4, Q1 of next year until we really, or even long, no one really knows, until funding and the general outlook of the economy improves somewhat.
Right. And outside of Skydecek, are you seeing startups kind of freaking out about this? What's the word in Silicon Valley in general?
I think we're an optimistic place. Like, I think venture capitalists and founders are naturally optimistic people, and so I think everyone is trying to look for the bright side on things, and I think that's an advantage that startups have, right? Big companies that have 100,000 people, 10,000 people, 1,000 people on payroll, this is very scary for them. If you're a startup with 2 people, 5 people, 20 people, it's much easier for you to be flexible, and there's really a competitive advantage that startups have when the larger economy is looking rough. And so I think it's probably kind of the same throughout the entire world. It's weird times, we're all at home. Nothing really feels different unless maybe you've been personally affected by this through a family member or through yourself. And we're all kind of just watching lots of Netflix, I suppose.
Yeah. So you mentioned something in the article, which, by the way, the article was published today on Startups Without Borders, so you can check it out there. And you mentioned that now is the time, just as you said, now is the time to write that cold email, to message someone on LinkedIn, message a potential investor, right? What many entrepreneurs are wondering is what's happening with the projections, with their valuation, with because there's so much uncertainty. What do you advise in that case?
Yeah, I think I was kind of say, I think it's a good time to talk to investors, especially to try to get advice, and make the connection and meet somebody. I think it will be hard for investors to cut checks right now from cold email, but it's a great way to put yourself into someone's thought process, someone's CRM, so that when they are investing again, maybe later this year or in a couple of months or whatever it's going to be, you're right there, you've been engaging them, you kind of know what they're looking for. In terms of evaluations, I've heard from some founders that they've gotten pushback now from investors being like, well, you got to lower your valuation. I think I'm not sure how widespread that is. I think for certain industries, it's very widespread. If your business is being incredibly materially affected by this, which I don't think many early stage pre-seed startups are at this point, some are. We have a consumer company that works with restaurants, and this has obviously changed their plans quite a bit. We still move forward and invest in them, and so, I think Lime is a company that, was worth $2 billion, that because no one's driving scooters anymore, their revenue has gone down. But it's not just a revenue problem, it's also like a liquidity problem where you're not totally certain where you're going to actually get the funding for things. Yeah. And so I think for these Series D, Series C, and kind of up companies, this seriously can affect things. But the kind of the earlier stage you are, I think the kind of less effective it can be, unless you're really a consumer company or a company that's really trying to interact with users in person, which some startups are, but of course many startups aren't, right? Like Airbnb is going to be really affected by this. I know they're planning on IPOing soon, but how much is this affecting PayPal? It probably is, but they're still processing payments and such.
Right. Yeah, actually, one of the questions we got from one of our viewers today is what's going to happen to the tourism, to the travel sector, right? To the whole industry, which is like one of the hardest hit right now. Do you have any idea of how the market could change?
I probably can ask one of my alumni companies who's in Netherlands about this, and they run a travel company. I'm sure it's really affected things. Yeah, I love traveling. I mean, I was just in Italy and Austria. I was planning on going to Japan, and I canceled that to go to New York, and then I canceled that to be at home because of the coronavirus. So it's definitely affecting things.
Mhm.
I think for a lot of people, if you still have income, which I know a lot of people don't, the U.S. unemployment numbers are definitely rising. Um, many people are probably spending less money than normal if you're able to keep your job, and they're probably just delaying trips till later. So it's definitely affecting things, but I think we'll hopefully see a surge of travel after this thing kind of dies down a little bit, if and when it does. Yeah, I mean it's hard. I know some people who work in the tourism industry, and having to cancel their trips, having to cancel, they basically have zero revenue right now, so it's difficult. And luckily, the U.S. government has opened up some loans for startups and small businesses and large businesses, and other countries. Some other countries have followed suit.
Mhm. Speaking of which, do you suggest or would you recommend an entrepreneur at this situation, at this stage right now, to get loan? What are the measures that they should take to kind of, you know, stop burning cash and kind of keep revenue at some level to persist?
Oh, I think it's really hard to say without knowing the business. I mean, some people are talking furloughing staff. Some staff, I think maybe they're reducing salaries. I don't know all the exact right answers on that. Um, lot of European governments have made it so if you don't lay off your staff, you'll get the money back. And so yeah, I mean, you have to kind of look at your own business here. I mean, startups go through tough times. This isn't the first, and I think Silicon Valley has seen these kind of rises and falls over and over. Um, so yeah, I think yeah, I'm not sure I have a good answer on how to exactly keep a business alive, but at some point, money runs out, and and people just trying to figure out ways to cut costs. And I know one startup we know was thinking about doing some side consulting with their software engineers because they can't actually
Right.
sell their own product.
Right.
Other times it could be really good to take a look at your company and maybe solve some internal challenges as well. One interesting fact that I talked to one of our consumer companies about is I think it's a really good time to get free signups, not or inexpensive signups for your consumer startup, because people are spending a lot more time on social media apps like Facebook. People are Googling more. People are kind of just on the computer more, which for ads means there's a lot more impressions to sell.
Yeah.
Probably the impressions have doubled in the last couple of weeks because people are just on their computer so much, on YouTube so much more, on Google so much more, on Facebook so much more. At the same time, a lot of big companies and a lot of bigger startups are cutting back their ad budgets because they can't acquire users.
Yeah.
And so I think it still will be a hard time to acquire users, but it's actually a very inexpensive time to run tests, I think, with ads and potentially acquire emails. And so it might be a good time to test out some of those assumptions via ads, look at conversion rates and such, because there's just a lot more supply and a lot less demand for ad spend right now.
Right, right. Yesterday we were talking to the regional manager of Techstars here there in the Middle East, and he was saying that there's going to be certain phases, and probably consumer demand is going to change, which means that our services, everything we're doing basically will have to adapt and change as well. Do you think that the entire market will change? Do you have kind of a vision on that, especially when it comes to customer trust and trust between people, because everyone is now a potential virus better?
Um, in the short term, I mean, obviously, yes. I mean, we're seeing these changes, and I would think there will be some larger changes that are going to emerge. Those changes being, we're seeing now that this kind of work from home culture is becoming a necessity. And I would not be surprised if, because we've run this experiment for 2 months, 3 months, whatever it's going to be, that employers become a lot more flexible with working from home, which has some advantages and disadvantages to it, certainly. I think many advantages to having that sort of flexible labor pool. So I think that's one area we'll see change. I think in America, I think this will be a larger wake-up call for how our healthcare system and medical system works, which I think will end up affecting a lot of industries, probably in like the 2 to 5 years. I think people are kind of seeing, wow, public health is, it's a national concern that we should be thinking about. Other long-term changes, I mean, I think, it's the funding cycle's going down. It's definitely hurts startup, but it can also help take away a lot of startups that maybe shouldn't have gotten funding in the first place, or startups that, if you think about the economy, these booms and busts, in the booms, a lot of companies get funded, and the busts, a lot of these startups get pruned away, and the ones who survive end up really being powerful. I think I saw one study, I forget which VC pumped this out, it was on LinkedIn, which basically said that during these kind of crises, actually the startups that succeed do much, much better than on average the startups do in a boom cycle. And so I think it's forcing investors to be a little more focused, a little more diligent. I don't know about the long-term projections. I think it's really hard to say.
Yeah.
I guess global relationships, I think, will be hard. I think nationally, we're going to see, there's still national flights. You can still drive within your nation. I was just talking to one of my companies in Austria right before this call, and he was saying, yeah, it looks like we're going to, have closed borders from the rest of the EU and from anybody else at the EU for the foreseeable future. And so I think that's going to make it, hard to do certain business activities that require some in-person connections.
Yeah, definitely. Here's a question every entrepreneur is asking us right now. Is it a good time to start a business? When you're at the idea stage, and is it a good time now? Should they go for it, or?
There's a lot of interesting, I don't know if it's ever a good or a bad time to start a business. I think for being a startup, I don't necessarily think now is any worse time than before. We are just so far removed from certain aspects of the market. We're not public companies, so we in some sense it's good. I think it's probably a hard time to start a travel company. Mm-hmm. I think it's probably a hard time to start a consumer company, a restaurant company. Might be a great time for a delivery company. Yeah. So I think, depending on what you're building, I don't think it's a horrible time, especially when governments are potentially opening up capital for you to not work, and maybe you have time to pursue your own ideas. Mm-hmm. Other reasons why it might be a good time. I mean, it's a lot cheaper to hire talent, right? When people are getting laid off or furloughed from big companies, they might be able to take that lower salary at a startup. So there are some advantages. If you look at the last economic cycle, to the 2008, 2009 kind of economic collapse, we might say, that's right when the current startup boom happened. Yeah. It was 2008, 2009, 2010, and then all the way up until 2020, we've been seeing consistent rise in these startups. And so I do think there's something counter-cyclical about startups and venture investing, where maybe a poor larger economic outcome could have some good effect on businesses. Another example being, I used to sell to video game companies, and I would sell them a product, and I'd say, look, I can make you hundreds of thousands of more dollars a year, maybe even millions. And some of these big video game companies, they're making $10 billion. They don't care about $1 million, if truth be told, or $500,000. And so, when businesses are losing revenue, when businesses have to cut costs to save employees, saving somebody $100,000, $50,000, $1 million in costs, they will maybe now be more likely to take that use that new software or use that new app because they have to save money. And I think when a good economy happens, it's actually kind of in some ways hard. Companies maybe have more budget, but it's hard to sell to them because things are going great. Why change? And when things are not going well, maybe that's when businesses might need to start looking towards, making some more disruptive changes.
Right. That's an interesting point, and I like your optimism to things. Your fresh air. So, just to finish with perhaps another positive note, do you see potential for certain industries in this context? Are there certain industries that you think are going to have a really good chance right now?
Hard to say. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Nintendo Switch is sold out. So gaming, I think, is doing well. Social media apps are doing well.
Mm-hmm.
Anything to do with social sharing. I mean, I've been doing trivia with some friends. I've been playing some board games with some friends online. So I think things that make that easier is good. I think that's probably another long-term change that'll happen because of this. Is I pretty busy person. I see a lot of my friends in Silicon Valley, but I have some good friends who live in other states or far away from me. But because of this, I'm actually seeing my friends who live far away more than I'm seeing my friends who live close to me.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe it will open up some new opportunities to how do you engage with your long distance relationships, not just, your romantic partners, but also your friends. And there might be some opportunities to figure out how to do that. I think better online collaboration tools are still a space that people will be looking into. How do you collaborate well? One of our startups, they get rid of background noise on phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
They're called Crisp, KRISP. They've been doing quite well because everyone's working from home and there's kids in the background or sirens in the background or something in the background. And so those are some, but is that a short-term gain or a long-term gain? I think it's really hard to say. I think in some ways it's going to be good in the long term, but I think the weird thing about this is, we know what the cause is, and the moment that, not the moment, but when things start kind of clearing up, things I think will kind of just go back to normal at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And so all this does feel like a little bit of a temporary shock, and I think it's kind of hard for a startup to necessarily hack in a large advantage in this space to grow. That's kind of my own thoughts. Startups are just kind of somewhat removed from that larger cycle.
Right. Is everyone in quarantine in Silicon Valley right now? Is that, has it been already imposed as a norm?
Yeah, so it's technically, I mean, and I'm sure it's the same in other places, sheltering in place.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're allowed to go to the grocery market. People kind of go on some light walks here or there around their neighborhood, but no one's really seen each other. We luckily in the Bay Area, I will say, and I have family in northern Italy and friends in Italy as well. But we sheltered in place about a week before anybody else did in America. And then California itself sheltered in place before a lot of other states did. And then also even before the shelters in place, I think people in Silicon Valley were not shaking hands. We were washing our hands very well. We were using hand sanitizer. And so I think that we'll see. I mean, California right now is doing pretty well, actually, compared to almost anywhere else in the States and the world. From a death per population and from a cases per population is not doing too bad right now. Northern California, where I live, kind of the Bay Area, is doing a lot better than Los Angeles right now because we started even earlier. I don't think we're going to hit hospital capacity in the Bay Area. I'll knock on wood for that, but I don't think we will here. So things are, I think that's why we're optimistic in some sense. I think we started a little bit earlier, but of course, given the way countries work, right, it kind of needs to be a whole contained, nation that works on this.
All right. Well, that's good to hear. I mean, you guys did a good job, apparently. Thank you so much, Brian. Is there any message that you would like to leave entrepreneurs who want to apply to Skydecek?
Yes. You can find more about the Skydecek accelerator at berkeley.skydecek.edu. Our next applications are open on July 8th, and we would love to get all the word out we can through founders throughout the world, and especially the Middle East. And even now, if you go to our website, there's a little apply link, and that sends a notification to me to kind of just keep an eye on this company and stuff and potentially share advice. So we're always looking to how do we engage founders and help founders and play connector. Just yesterday, I talked to a founder from the Ukraine. They're a little early for Skydecek, but our next applications open in July and the program starts in October. And so I was able to give advice on how to best apply to our program. We think Silicon Valley remains the best place in the world to raise venture capital, to find customers. There's a reason why there's more unicorns within 100 kilometers of here than almost all the rest of the world combined. And so we're just trying to find more great startups. So if that's you who's listening or you have friends, please send them our way. We're always looking to try to be helpful.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's early there, so thank you so much. It's been amazing. And I hope this quarantine is spent, as productively and as happily as possible.
Of course, yeah. And I hope you are doing safe and well. And I'll let you know the next time I'm out in Italy.
Yes, please do. Please do. Thank you so much,
Perfect.
Ryan.
Ciao.
Good day. Ciao, ciao.